My name's Tonia, yeah, and I was born in Melbourne. That was in a time when it was more acceptable to get married when you left home than just leave home with your boyfriend. That was in around 1970s, the early 1970s. Things just started to change a little bit. So I married my boyfriend. I was only 17, but it was like by doing that, I had my family's blessing to leave home and go and have an adventurous life. So that was 1974, and we went across the Nullarbor to Western Australia, and it was dirt road. And we had a little Morris, some people call it a baker's van, really cute and really old. And we drove across in that, yeah, very slowly, yeah. We basically could get work anywhere. There was absolutely no problem or to get work in Australia at that time. It didn't matter what you did. But how easy it was to settle in, because we just got there and the people were so friendly, and it was in the middle of the bush and it was really quaint, and Mel was a mechanic, so he got a job straight away. They gave us a caravan to live in straight away. Within 2 months we had a little flat, and it was like, wow, living in the bush, go out camping, swimming in salt lakes. It was really, really exciting time. At that time, I thought I would just have a lot of children and a house to live in. It wasn't, and a garden. I like and grow some flowers and vegetables. It wasn't really very big. I have to say that. But I did have a fancy to see some tropics. I wanted to see waterfalls and jungles. So after a little while, wasn't too sure that I really wanted to live in such a dry place. And I think we thought we'd go and live back with our family and buy the house there with the money that we had. And so when we got some money, we went back, and it didn't take very long to figure out there's no way in the world did I want to live in some suburb in a nice house. It's like, oh, no, I couldn't do that. Hey, I had to basically go back bush. So I went back to Western Australia. And still the waterfalls stayed with me, and exploring bits of the southwest, come close. But then I started to hear of people's travels through India and Indonesia, because you'd get overland travellers coming back. And it just started to sound more and more exciting to see these people who are actually living a bit different to how we live. So I thought, no, I really want to see what this Asia's all about. And I went to Bali in the late 70s. Then it was even Kuta was just a small village with rice paddies and cows and coconuts. And the women wore sarongs. Half the women were bare-chested, and every single woman had flowers in her hair, young or old. So it was like, wow, that was really exciting. And see coconut leaf walls and bamboo walls and grass roofs, and wow, you can actually live on this planet and you don't have to borrow all this money from a bank. You don't have to have bricks and cement and tiles, and you can have shelter that doesn't commit you for your whole life to pay some bank. But for me, seemed easy. I wanted to go and have adventures. So then Indonesia was another adventure, and I got to stay there for 3 months. And by then I already had Ryan. He was just about 2 years old when I went there for 3 months. And he loved it, and they loved him, and learned to eat different foods, see different buildings. And that just made me realise that I didn't want to own a home in the suburbs or anywhere, in fact, if it was going to mean that I was committed to pay someone for the rest of my life to do it. Like, it would take my freedom away, my inability to move, and that became a really strong point for me. So even I saved enough money to we bought some land in Kuranda, and by then we'd been travelling, lived in a bus, had a baby in a bus. So by then I had 3 little children, because I still stuck with the dream of I wanted lots of kids. And I'd seen the tropics, been in the tropics, found other ways to live. I thought, no, that's it. There's tropics in Australia. So I want to see these tropics in Australia. Then we spent the next few months fitting out this bus, taking most of the seats out, leaving some. Made it really cute because we, had the time to do it, and we had a lot of fun. And then we're having so much fun, I got pregnant with baby number 3 then, because I didn't use contraceptive, hey. And people laugh and say that's why you had 5 kids, but it's not really, actually. I knew exactly when I could fall pregnant, and I tried to be careful, but sometimes it was just too overwhelming. And you just had to take the chance. You couldn't just, it was just one of those moments. So there I was, pregnant again. There I was only 24 actually. I turned 25 just before she was born. So I'm really for young mums. I don't care what anybody says. So actually I'm 24, and by then we finished the bus, and I got a great big belly, and we come back across the Nullarbor, and then a lot of it was sealed. So that was already, it was about 7 years later. Anyway, that's just on our way to go and see the tropics in Australia. So that brings us up to North Queensland, and that's where you got the real tropics, the coconuts. You start with coconuts and papayas everywhere, and avocados and mangoes and seafood, and it was just amazing. And the jungles and the waterfalls and the rivers and all those things I always really wanted, they were right here in Australia, hey. And then I ended up hearing about Kuranda. And Kuranda was a bit like the Nimbin of North Queensland then. So for me that was just really lovely, and there was lots of people there had bought the land the same as here in Nimbin, like communities. People bought the land together and building simple houses out of anything from glass bottles to bamboo to mud bricks to whatever, coconut, tree houses. And that was really, really, that was all pretty exciting. And then I'm still young and have baby number 3, and we find some land and thought life was just fantastic, hey. But then I was really still young. Like it's a time like that's when my marriage fell apart, because there was all these people had different ideas, like and philosophies in life, and there was pondering. And we had a squatter on our place, and she was just actually an opportunist, really. But that's just the way life is. And there used to be all these talks about how we could have like more freedom in the relationship. And for me it was more or less, well, not really too sure about that, because, and like people try and say like jealousy is a really bad thing. And okay, like jealousy can be destructive, but I still think it's just still another human emotion. You know, they're all human emotions. So it's got its place, you know, and in some ways it's a bit of a protective thing. It can overwhelm you and be chaotic and extreme and not healthy, but I still think it's a normal feeling, let's say. And so all this, like, so you shouldn't be jealous, and, you know, like everyone can have sex together or whatever with each other and you and them, and didn't really sit very well with me. I just thought, no, well, why is it so destructive then when people experiment like that? It always seems to be some people get hurt and it's destructive, and it never stays that way forever. But like I said, we were young, and my husband, he was, you know, all of a sudden he found himself in a situation where, well, he's still really young and he's got 3 children, and this other people are offering him sex, and, you know, like, still a lot of life to live. So he took the sex, and I couldn't deal with that. I just couldn't find a comfortable way with that. Anyway, so I fucked off from this dream of having land, and then I came back and made an approach that maybe we could just, for the benefit of the kids, we could just share the land and try and find a way. Because I'd been camping in the forest, a friend let me make a camp, because my only other option was to get a pension, and that wasn't very much money then, and rent a house in a town, like right back to all those things where I didn't want to go. So I had to make the choice. I could just live really primitive in the bush but still keep my freedom. So I had to choose that, and that gave me time to think, well, maybe I can make a different approach with my husband. Like, we can't be together, but maybe we could share the land together. And he could let me build a little shack on the land, so at least the children have got their family together. And that didn't work out. That's really funny, because so we started to get along, and remember, we'd been together, I was 14 when I met him. So we've been through a lot, and we were good friends, obviously, you know, as young people, to stay together and then go and have all those adventures. But we were just really, really young, you know. And like, say, what happened there with, you know, him having sex with this other lady, this squatter on the land, and me not being able to deal with that, you know, that's just the way it was. Even though I'm really sorry that we couldn't work it out better, I really am, because we could have given our kids much more richness than what they got. We still loved them and did our best, but we could have been more solid for the 3 children that we had together. But that was the funny thing was, so I'm gonna say, okay, I'm living in the bush, maybe we can be more reasonable, you know, I can accept that, you know, he's not my husband anymore, he's got another girlfriend, but I'll build a place there. Well, the girlfriend got jealous. She couldn't handle it. So it was like, okay, so I'm still living in the bush, you know, cutting. I had a coconut spike. I used to grate a coconut every day and squeeze it, and the cream would go in my coffee, which wasn't real coffee. It was roasted soya beans, but it was pretty yummy. And the grated coconut would go in the fruit salad. So I'm living like that. and think about that. And I just went back to him and said, well, you can have it. I'll have the children and you can have the place. And I just travelled. I went to India, went to Europe. I went back to North Queensland because I had to go somewhere. And I picked up the bus. I said, okay, let me have the bus. That was after I got back from India and Europe. So I picked up the old bus and started living in the bus again. And I did that for about a year and a half, around Coranda and on the coast. And that was all really good, but I really knew I wanted to find a piece of land. And it came down to, I wanted to light a fire. I wanted to cook my food on a fire and not have anybody looking at me telling me I couldn't do it. So that meant I had to have a place with a little bit of privacy and firewood, which comes back to a little bit of land with a few trees. And the rest I could do. You know, give me a bit of dirt and I didn't have money, and the government started a project here in Nimbin. And the government it was a Labor government, the left government, they wanted 28 families of low income to start this project that had 200 acres of land. And the idea was that the 28 families would subdivide the land amongst themselves, each have a little plot, maybe a 10-acre plot, something like that, and just build really simple basic shelter and start some cottage industry, even growing vegetables or making a craft. But the whole thing was not to owe the money. Okay? So it was a very exciting idea, like the things I'd always thought, yeah. So I came down from North Queensland to go to this project. And I went there and it started off really good, but it got taken over. We were just 28 poor families trying to put our feet on the ground. Just build a simple shelter. Like $10,000 each, honestly, for the people who wanted it, would have put a really good roof over their head, good wooden floors, walls, windows, water tanks. Start. That would have given them a really comfortable start. And they could pay that off like in 3 years or 4 years, realistically. And then, at that point, the government changed. So they had the carpet pulled from out, it all got stopped. So it didn't last, it didn't work. It was a really good idea, actually. It was a beautiful idea. And it all fell apart, but I was here in Nimbin then. So then I just went across the road where they had really cheap plots of land, and you didn't have to go before a committee. You didn't have to get approval. I did try approval. I tried approval on 3 places I went. So Avalon wasn't one of those places. All you needed to do was have the money, okay? And it's got bylaws, but they're really hard to uphold. But I did like their bylaws. Basically, all their bylaws are just about maintaining the land, like to leave it be, basically, to leave it be in a nature habitat. So I thought, well, that's good enough for me. So I got to Avalon, and I forgot to mention there's some other things happened along the way. And I lived in India for quite a long time in between all that, and even in Germany for 6 months, and still kept coming back to this thing that I knew I needed to live on the land. That was the only chance I was going to have the most fulfilled life I could have for myself, like to nurture myself and my own feelings of this life on earth, was that I needed to have some land and space around me. So then, by then I had enough money. This piece of land on Avalon, no questions asked, okay? Just $11,000, thank you very much. I got that together, and thank you very much. And then I didn't owe anybody any money whatsoever. Had a piece of land. I made a fireplace. I still had the bath. So, and started to make the bamboo house. And it's funny, like then, I had another child in amongst that. In Europe and India, I met a German man who's very interested in coming to Australia and being in Australia. And anyway, we had, this romance that was, it had its good moments, but was a little bit of a struggle. And I was actually still grieving my long-term marriage. That didn't work out at all, because really I was actually still grieving for the loss of the first family. It was a great loss, really. So I had to be very brave and courageous and say that, we couldn't live together. We weren't going to be able to find a way to have a life together. So then I'd already turned 30. I had 4 children. I bought this piece of land, and it was a bit like old Mother Hubbard who lived in the cupboard. But I always had food, so there was no problem really. Just the children had to learn to walk long distances, and they had to learn how to wash their own clothes and how to pick up firewood every day. And then I thought I was old. I already thought I was an old lady. By the time I was 32, I saw myself as being very old, probably never, have another fella in my life, because I'm already old and I've got 4 children. And nobody likes hard work anymore. No one wants to chop firewood and I thought, well, you know what? Then that's okay. I'm just going to live by myself and be happy with that, because I don't want another fella in my life unless he's happy to sit by the fire. If he's happy to sit beside me by the fire and help me keep the fire burning, then might be a different situation. And that's how I met Alan, who's been my partner for 27 years. And at that point in time, because I just moved over to the land and was building the house, and so I'm building this bamboo house with the 2 little kids, and they met this newcomer just over the hill, and because I used to go and walk and visit him. Then they wanted to go and visit him every day. And they'd just walk over the hill and come back, and the kids would come running back and, oh, he's so nice. And today he had jam biscuits. And the next day they'd come, oh, and he had fruit cake. And I used to think, oh, gosh, this guy's got a really terrible diet. Jam biscuits and fruit cake. But one day they came back and they said, oh, Mum, look, he's always so friendly and he feeds us whenever we go there. And can we invite him for dinner? I said, oh, I guess so. I guess we could do that. And then they told me what I had to cook. said, okay, I can do that for you guys. And remember, I have to walk. From the original bamboo house was actually just about 12.5 kilometres from Nimbin. So I had to walk in and walk back for my supplies. So it used to take me about 2 hours to walk in and 2.5 hours to walk back. And then I had to carry all that food back with me. So, but I made sure I had all the ingredients for this. They really wanted to make nice food for this for this guy. And so he turns up at dinner time. I've got the fire going. And he comes into the bamboo house. And he's got an armful of split wood. You know, a guy brings you a bunch of roses or something, your first date. You know, it wasn't really a date. It was my kids asking him for dinner. And he turns up with an armload of split wood. It was like, oh, this fellow's something different, hey? And then for me to get arrested by the police for growing marijuana, because that was when the council came, and I didn't know the council had come for a visit. They come down, they rang the police and said there was some marijuana plants growing. So then the police come and arrest. That was my first arrest for growing marijuana. There's only a few plants in pots, but and the police come and did that. And then I got the demolition order. And it was like, oh, fuck, I just want to live by the fire. I've been busted just for growing a few pot plants. I've had a demolition order from these council guys saying they're going to come and pull the house down. And I'm just sitting there thinking, oh, I'm not too sure about Australia. You know, I thought it was a good idea, but it's really a battle. Maybe I'm just going to go and live in India. That was how you just get despondent. You know, it was one of my low moments. And there's Alan beside me, and he put his arm around and said, oh, it'll be all right. And then he stood up really quickly and went outside. I always remember that. I thought, I even thought, he must have been busting for a weed. He's just run out. And then he came back and sat down and put his both arms around me, and he'd never done that before, and just leaned over and kissed me. And it wasn't like a wild, passionate kiss, just a warm kiss. And it was, and he just said, I think we should go upstairs, because that's where I used to sleep. And just like that. And I just said, yeah, okay. And then, so I've got 2 little children, remember, asleep. And this is months later. He's been eating with us then nearly every night. So my kids get up in the morning, 2 little kids. One's 3 and one's 6, I think. And the 3-year-old says to the 6-year-old, Alan left his shoes here. And the 6-year-old says to the 3-year-old, no, he didn't. Alan slept here last night. And they climbed up the ladder. They were so excited. She knew straight away, like, what had happened. Hey, and that he was up there. And that was a done deal. You know, like, that's it. And then they come and pulled the house down, hey. So he said, you better come over the hill and stay in my place. And I stayed there ever since, hey, yeah. So that's a big thing, like, and not lived with anybody. Here's a lady who's got 4 children already. But he always had wanted a family, but he'd always wanted adventures as well. So he made sure he did a lot of the adventuring. And so he was 38. He'd already walked 2 years from China to Tibet, all illegal. So he had a lot of that adventure. Not all of it out by a long man, but a lot of it was gone. So he was ready to, sort of to be a family person. So that's when I said that I would have another child with him, because he didn't have any children, and he was really wonderful to my 4 children. So then I had baby number 5. He'd been living in India, in the same places where I'd lived in India, and they were really remote places, really unusual places at the time, where you had to make your own camp. There was no room to sleep in and things like that. And I just loved it. I just loved the hazy sky. Part of that reminded me of my time in Western Australia, which, even though, like I said, I've been chasing waterfalls, I still got a real love for the dry lands too. I really see their beauty. But then, like when I got up into the mountains, they had to be self-sufficient, so they had to grow their own food, make their own buildings, make their own clothing, weave their own fabrics. So they all had really strong work ethic, a different sort of work ethic. But the work ethic was hard work, but to nurture and feed yourself. Whereas the work ethic for a Western society over the last 50 years has turned to something that's all about prospering financially, and get the really good car and earn lots of money, and this was seen as prosperous, where I really think we lost the plot, because I didn't get anything from any of that, and it's cost the earth so much, and the earth's what gives us our life. It's the water, the forests, the air, it all comes from a nurtured earth and gives us a nurtured life. So without these people maybe even really being aware of it or putting it down in words, but just the way they'd lived for centuries upon centuries, they were being more like caretakers than land owners. And it's just good to keep sight for your own spirit. I can only speak for myself, hey. But for my spirit is to keep that knowledge that I can look after myself, and I don't have to be indebted to anybody, and what I can get from a community. Now in our community, it's just good companionship, like friendships, support, music. That's about the best that we can get in our community at this point in time, because that's all the whole structure allows. I mean, there's people exchange work here, but it's still very much a Western way of life, largely. We've all got our own dream, and that's everybody's right. And I couldn't say I'm right or wrong. Most people think I've got a really extreme view. Though I think it's actually really simple. I can't see there's no extremes to it. It's basically just simplify your life. I just think it's our birthright to be able to feed and shelter ourselves. As a human being, given life on this planet, being born onto this planet, I feel it's our birthright to be able to somehow find and seek shelter and a way to live and exist. And Nimbin's Nimbin's only a small place, hey. It's just full of a lot of dreamers, a lot of people with a lot of really good ideas. And I think a lot of people felt it's as good a place as any to make a last stand, to try and find a way to live. It's like life, it's all here. It's like everything we need is here, everything. We just have to be able to see it and have some understanding of what do we really need, you know. And mostly it's all just nurture. We need to nurture one another. And that's not just food and shelter, then that's friendship and music and art and everything. I found all that in Nimbin, yeah. I found all that, hey. And that's why it makes it really special. And even though it's really hard, but I think that life is hard anyway, at times, and in this current state, life on the whole planet can seem a bit fragile, but I think it's all right.
If you had one word to describe Nimbin, what would it be?
Maybe I'll just have to say hope. Find a bit of hope there. Yeah.